He said her name, out loud, in front of everyone. The coffee burned through my skin, but I didn't feel it. My daughter, my Emily, was now a break room punchline. Jake wasn't just bragging about sleeping with her. He was reenacting it like a sales pitch. Jacket, nail polish, every humiliating detail. Then he became my boss. The guy who turned my daughter into office gossip now gave me performance reviews. And when I confronted him, he smirked and said, "Maybe raise your daughter better." I swallowed my fists. I didn't fight him that day. But I'm the quiet kind of dangerous, the kind that ruins men slowly. He had no idea I already knew exactly how to end him. And by the time the auditors showed up, he was already done. Now ask yourself, what would you do if it was your daughter? My name is Michael Carver, and I'm 45 years old. After 20 years at Midwest Logistics, I've settled into the rhythm of my operations manager role, sharing morning coffee with Karen before my 5 a.m. warehouse shifts. The diesel rumble of trucks and steady beep of scanners mark my days alongside my wife Karen, who teaches 3rd grade, and our daughter Emily, now in her 1st year of college. Jake Morrison, our newest sales director, struts through the warehouse like he owns it, dropping crude jokes that make the loading crew uncomfortable. My fingers trace the spine of my logbook. 20 years of perfect records, every shipment, every number filed away in notebooks and in my head. The warehouse team trusts my steady hand, even as Jake's aggressive style threatens our careful balance. Pride built this career. Pride protected my family. But let me start from the beginning. Monday mornings at Midwest Logistics always started the same way. Stale coffee in paper cups, sales numbers flying so back and forth across the break room like darts. You know the drill if you've worked anywhere long enough. Same faces, same conversations, just a different set of weekend stories to dissect. I was stirring my 3rd packet of sugar into coffee that already tasted like warmed over regret when Jake's voice cut through the usual chatter. He had that tone, the one that always made my jaw clench. That gather round boys swagger that turned every story into a locker room highlight reel. "So, there I am at Murphy's, you know, that college bar by the stadium?" Jake leaned against the vending machine, all perfect teeth and pressed collar. This smoking hot 19-year-old keeps eyeing me from across the bar. Something in my chest tightened. Murphy's was Emily's favorite spot. She'd been talking about their Thursday wing specials since starting classes last fall. But lots of kids went there, right? Had to be dozens of 19-year-olds at a college bar on any given night. "She's wearing this vintage jacket, right? Like this faded blue thing she probably picked up at Goodwill." Jake mimed pulling on a collar, and my coffee suddenly tasted like acid. Emily had been so proud of that jacket. Spent an entire Saturday afternoon hunting through thrift stores until she found it. The room had gotten quieter, more heads turning toward Jake's corner. He was working the crowd now, gesturing with those manicured hands that had never touched a shipping label or hefted a crate. "Best part? She's got this weird purple nail polish on, but it's all chipped like she'd been biting her nails." My fingers went numb around the paper cup. Emily had been painting her nails that exact shade last week at the kitchen table, telling Karen about her upcoming psychology midterm. The chips had driven her crazy all weekend. "So anyway," Jake continued, walking his fingers through the air like little legs, "I work my magic, right? Buy her a couple drinks, do the whole 'you're so mature for your age' routine." He paused for effect, drinking in the attention. Next thing you know, Emily's heading back to my place. The cup crumpled in my grip, hot coffee splashing across my knuckles. I barely felt it. Emily. He'd said her name. My Emily. The room swam for a second. Faces blurring as coworkers exchanged glances, some uncomfortable, others barely hiding smirks. They all knew who she was. She'd been to company picnics, dropped off my lunch when I forgot it. Now they were seeing her through Jake's story, reduced to another notch on his belt. I needed air. The break room walls were closing in, Jake's voice still carrying as I pushed through the door. And let me tell you what happened next. The hallway fluorescence buzzed overhead as I pressed my forehead against the cool metal of a locker. My breath came in short bursts, burning in my chest like I'd sprinted a mile. 20 years of careful reputation building, of showing Emily what it meant to carry yourself with dignity, and Jake had turned it into a punchline over cheap coffee and donuts. This needed handling, private handling. But as I stood there, trying to steady my hands against the locker, only one question kept circling through my mind. What exact words would make him understand exactly what he'd done? What combination of syllables could possibly convey the depth of this violation? My tongue pressed against my teeth, tasting copper, as I listened to the continued laughter floating through the break room door. I caught Jake coming out of his 10 a.m. sales meeting. That same self-satisfied grin still plastered across his face. You ever notice how some people wear their arrogance like a designer suit? That was Jake all over. Hey, got a minute? I kept my voice casual, like this was just another workflow discussion. Conference room B's open. He followed me in, probably expecting another logistics update. That's what kills me looking back. He had no idea what was coming. Didn't even have the decency to look nervous. The conference room still held that lingering scent of morning coffee and whiteboard markers. Funny how you notice these little details when your world's about to tilt sideways, isn't it? I took a seat, opened my notebook, and clicked my pen. Old habits from too many meetings, sure. But mostly I needed something to do with my hands. So, Jake. I glanced up, measuring each word. Murphy's Bar by the stadium, blue thrift store jacket, chipped purple nail polish. I watched his face, waiting for even a flicker of shame. Nothing. Ring any bells? He settled back in his chair, that smirk widening. Ah, so you heard about my weekend. You mean how you're broadcasting my daughter's name around the break room like it's some kind of trophy? The pen creaked in my grip. That weekend? Look, Michael. Can I call you Mike? He leaned forward, all false sympathy. What two consenting adults do in their free time. I'm only asking for two things, I cut in, proud of how steady my voice stayed. Keep it private and show some basic respect. That's not complicated. You know that moment when you're absolutely certain how someone's going to respond, but you still pray you're wrong? Yeah. Jake leaned back, crossed his arms, and delivered the kind of smile that makes you question everything you believe about nonviolence. Maybe raise your daughter better. 5 words. Just 5 simple words. But they hit like a freight train. My body went electric, every muscle coiled, ready to launch. The pen in my hand might as well have been welded to my fingers. The chair creaked under me as I shifted, and for one crystal-clear second, I saw it all play out. The satisfying crunch of knuckles meeting teeth. That smirk finally wiped clean. The sweet, burning release of 20 years of professional restraint exploding in one perfect moment of justice. Then reality kicked in, cold and sharp as November rain. I'd lose my job, no question there. Health insurance, gone. Emily's college fund would take the hit next. All because I couldn't keep my fists in check for 5 minutes. Karen's voice echoed in my head. We're not those kind of people, Michael. We're better than that. So I swallowed it. Pushed it down deep where all the other bitter pills live. The pen slowly uncreased from my grip as I stood up. This ends now, I said, surprised at how calm I sounded. The stories, the break room theater, all of it stops. I walked out before the rage could crack through. Had to. Some doors, once you open them, never really close again. The hallway felt too bright, too normal. A values in action poster stared down at me. Some corporate nonsense about integrity and teamwork. 2 sales reps passed by, laughing about something, and I caught the tail end. Just like Jake said, my stomach turned. Every laugh, every whisper, every sidelong glance in the halls now carried a new weight. I made it back to my desk somehow, but the rest of that day's just a blur of spreadsheets and shipping manifests I couldn't focus on. One thought kept circling. I'd chosen the high road, kept my hands clean and my job secure. But what happened tomorrow? What new story would Jake spin while I sat there, silent and professional, letting him hold court with my dignity as his punchline? The next morning hit like a hangover, minus the fun of earning one. HR's email landed at 8:15, crisp, professional, about as warm as February frost. Please join Sandra Klein for a brief check-in regarding workplace conduct standards. You ever notice how those little corporate conference rooms all smell the same? Like coffee-stained carpet and desperate small talk. Sandra sat there with her tablet and her practiced neutral expression, probably checking off boxes in her head. Potential hostile environment? Check. Family complications? Check. Liability concerns? Double check. Michael, she started, folding her hands. We take all interpersonal concerns seriously. Our goal is maintaining a professional environment where everyone feels respected. I shifted in my chair, that fake leather squeaking like it was calling me out. I appreciate that, Sandra. We've spoken with all relevant parties. She glanced at her notes. While we understand personal relationships can create complex dynamics, we trust our team leaders to maintain appropriate boundaries. Complex dynamics. That's what we're calling it now? 20 years of showing up early, staying late, building this place from the ground up, and my daughter's name was being passed around like a party favor. But sure. Let's talk about appropriate boundaries. Of course, I said, because what else could I say? My throat felt like I'd swallowed sand. Sandra smiled, that HR smile. All teeth, no warmth. We're confident everyone involved understands our professional standards going forward. Translation: keep your head down and don't make waves. I nodded, stood up, shook her hand because that's what we do here. Professional standards and all that. Walking back to my desk felt like running a gauntlet. Angela from accounting gave me this soft, sad smile that cut deeper than any insult. 2 customer service reps stopped whispering the moment I rounded the corner. And there was Tommy, fresh out of college, hunched over his phone by the water cooler. Said she was totally into it, practically begging. His voice died when he saw me. Funny how fast kids can suddenly get thirsty and scatter. I sat down hard in my chair, pulled up the weekly metrics like they might actually matter. Routes, deliveries, efficiency scores, numbers don't judge, right? Numbers don't whisper in break rooms or smirk when you pass by. The company-wide email hit at 10:47. Not that I was watching the clock or anything. Subject: leadership team updates, effective immediately. My stomach dropped before I even opened it. You know that feeling when you're bracing for bad news, but reality still manages to punch harder? There it was. Neat little grid of promotions and transfers. I had to read it twice, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. Jake Thompson, Sales Director, Northeast Region. He jumped clean over me. 20 years of experience versus what? Charm and a sharp smile? I watched through my office window as Pat from upper management clapped Jake on the shoulder. 2 more suits stopped by his desk, all handshakes and congratulations. Not one of them knew Emily's middle name, or how she'd wanted to be a veterinarian until junior year, or the way she still color-coded her study notes like she did in high school. My monitor's power button creaked under my finger as I shut it off. Had to. One more second of watching that celebration, and I might have put my fist through the screen. Then it hit me. Sucked all the air right out of my lungs. Tomorrow morning, Jake becomes my boss. I opened a new email, cursor blinking at me like it was laughing. To Karen. Subject: what do you even call this? How do you put words around watching your daughter's name become office gossip, then having to report to the man who made it happen? The cursor just kept blinking, waiting for answers I didn't have. Ever had to sit in one of those modern conference rooms? All glass, walls and harsh sunlight, nowhere to hide? Yeah, that was my new normal. 9 a.m. sharp, watching Jake settle into his chair like it was a throne. The morning glare hit everything. His polished nameplate, that smug little smile, my white-knuckled grip on my weekly report. Michael, he drawled, stretching back. Let's talk about shaking things up around here. 20 years ago, I'd started in shipping with a tape gun and manifest sheets. The coffee back then came from a machine that ate quarters, and the warehouse smelled like cardboard and honest sweat. Now I was watching Jake tap his Mont Blanc pen against quarterly projections. Your numbers are consistent, he said, making it sound like a disease. But the market's changing. We need young talent, fresh energy. He caught Sharon's eye through the glass as she passed, made sure she could see him holding court. Can't get stuck in old ways, right? My throat felt like I'd swallowed steel wool. The systems work. They're proven. Sure. He waved that off like smoke. But proven doesn't mean optimal. I've got some college recruits lined up. Hungry kids who understand modern dynamics. Another pointed look through the glass. You know how it is with young talent. So eager to please. The pen in my hand creaked. I forced my fingers to relax before plastic snapped. Through the wall, I could see Thompson from sales nodding along, probably remembering Jake's breakroom stories. Stories about my Emily. Anything else? I kept my voice flat. That's all for now. He flashed that television preacher smile. Just keep your mind open to fresh perspectives. I walked out past curious eyes and whispered conversations that died when I got close. Made it to my desk, pulled up shipping manifests, and pretended the numbers still mattered. At home, I'd been doing my best to keep this poison contained. Karen and I had an unspoken agreement. No work talk at dinner. Emily didn't need to know how her name was being passed around like currency. She had midterms coming up. A summer internship to chase. Let her focus on that, I thought. Let her keep her pride. But secrets have a way of spreading, don't they? That night, I came home late, expecting the usual quiet kitchen and warmed-up plates. Instead, I found Emily at the counter, shoulders shaking, phone lighting up every few seconds with new messages. Karen stood at the sink, scrubbing an already clean pot like she was trying to wear through the metal. He told everyone? Emily's voice cracked. She held up her phone, showing me screenshots from some campus social group. Sarah's cousin works in your billing department. She said Jake's been The glass of water in my hand felt suddenly heavy. Emily wiped her eyes, smearing mascara. "I feel so stupid," she whispered. "So dirty. He acted like he actually liked me, Dad. Said all these things about being mature for my age, how special I was." A bitter laugh caught in her throat. "Guess the whole office knows how special now, huh?" Karen's jaw clenched tight enough I could hear teeth grinding. The pot hit the drying rack with a crack. "I'll handle this," I said, the words tasting like acid. Because what else could I say? That I'd already tried? That her father, the man who was supposed to protect her, had to sit there every morning and take Jake's smirking innuendos? "How?" Emily asked, fresh tears spilling. "It's already out there. Everyone knows." I didn't have an answer. The water glass sweated in my grip while Karen stared holes in the kitchen table and Emily's phone kept lighting up with new messages. After they went upstairs, I walked back out to the car, sat there in the dark driveway, with my forehead pressed against the steering wheel, breathing in old leather and yesterday's coffee. Tomorrow morning would bring some new humiliation I couldn't even see coming yet. Another glass room, another smirking comment, another reminder that I was powerless to stop any of it. That weekend stretched like warm taffy, each hour pulling thinner than the last. I sat in my recliner pretending to watch football, but my mind kept rewinding through every moment. From that first coffee-bitter morning in the break room, to Emily's mascara-stained tears in our kitchen. You ever notice how failure plays on repeat? Each loop showing you exactly where you should have done something different? Karen brought me a sandwich I didn't want, and settled onto the couch arm. "Maybe," she said carefully like she was handling glass, "maybe it's time to look elsewhere. 20 years is enough loyalty if they can't return it." I rubbed my eyes until colors bloomed. Quitting lets him win. Plus, there's Emily's tuition. The mortgage. The words felt hollow even as I said them. We'd manage. But I caught the tight lines around her mouth, the way her fingers twisted her wedding ring. The waiting was wearing her down too. Monday morning, I drove to work in a fog, muscle memory carrying me through security and up to my office. The resignation letter template sat blank on my screen. Just needed a date, a signature, 3 sentences explaining why. I printed it anyway, slid it into my desk drawer like a loaded gun. Found myself practicing the words under my breath. I'm done. Simple enough, right? But they caught in my throat every time. The afternoon sales meeting dragged on in fluorescent hell. Jake stood at the whiteboard, marker squeaking as he drew aggressive arrows pointing up. "It's about hunter's instinct," he announced, pacing like some cut-rate motivational speaker. "You either have that killer drive or you don't." The old guard, his eyes locked onto mine for a heartbeat. They played it safe, but safe doesn't feed the bottom line anymore. Thompson and Richards nodded along like bobbleheads. Sarah from accounts actually took notes. I remembered when my experience carried weight in these rooms, when people leaned in to hear operational insights earned over decades. Now, I might as well have been furniture. After everyone filed out, I walked the warehouse aisles. The familiar smell of cardboard and diesel usually centered me, but tonight it just reminded me how long I'd breathed this air. 20 years of climbing, of earning respect, inch by inch, all erased by one smirking bastard with the stories about my daughter. I stopped between towers of pallets, letting the shadows swallow me. The truth sat bitter on my tongue. My pride might be intact, but my leverage was gone. Every day I stayed was another victory for Jake. Another crack in my authority. Another whisper about poor old Michael who couldn't protect his own kid. My hand drifted to my pocket where I'd folded that resignation letter. Emily's face flashed in my mind. Not the tears from Friday, but that morning before everything went sideways. Her showing off her chipped blue nail polish, laughing about finding it at the thrift store. "Vintage cool, Dad," she'd said. "You wouldn't understand." The paper crinkled under my fingers. One signature and this would be over. No more smirks, no more innuendos, no more watching my life's work turn to ash in my hands. I'd just pulled out the letter when footsteps echoed on concrete. A pair of worn leather Oxfords appeared at the edge of my shadow, attached to pressed slacks I recognized from accounting. "Got a minute?" Mark's gravelly voice came from above. "Before you do something permanent?" The next morning, I met Mark in conference room C before the early shift rolled in. You know those moments when everything feels like it's balanced on a knife's edge? That's what it was like, sitting there with the blinds half drawn, watching dawn creep across his legal pad. Mark wasn't what you'd call an imposing figure. 28 years in accounting had given him that particular slouch you get from hunting decimal points. But there was something steady in the way he squared that yellow pad. Something deliberate in how he placed his coffee exactly 3 inches from the corner. "Been watching the numbers," he said. voice low like we were sharing state secrets. Jake's expense reports didn't add up, so I dug deeper. He slid a manila folder across the table. Think you'll find this interesting. I opened it, and let me tell you, numbers might be boring to most folks, but these sang like a choir. Double-dipped hotel stays in Cincinnati. Mileage claims that would have put him halfway to Mars. Client dinners logged for days when those same clients were documented in Mexico or Miami. Look at the pattern, Mark said, tapping a column of dates. Every third Friday, expense claims spike. Always just under the automatic review threshold. Always rounded to nice, even numbers. The air felt different suddenly, like that moment before a summer storm breaks. How long? At least 8 months. Mark pulled out another sheet. Each individual claim looks clean enough. But stack them up? He shook his head. It's basic fraud, hidden behind that $1,000,000 smile of his. You ever notice how hope can sneak up on you? One minute you're drowning, the next there's solid ground under your feet. I studied those neat columns of dates and totals, seeing not just numbers but a rhythm of greed that any auditor would spot in a heartbeat. Company handbook's pretty clear on internal reporting, Mark continued, sliding over a highlighted page. Especially during scheduled audits. Full protection for whistleblowers, confidential channels, the works. My throat felt dry. What's the risk? That's the beauty of it. Mark leaned back, and for the first time, I saw a smile crack his professional mask. We do this by the book. Everything documented, everything time-stamped. Jake can bluster all he wants, but numbers don't lie, and they don't back down from intimidation. The helplessness that had been crushing my chest started to lift, replaced by something that felt an awful lot like purpose. What do you need from me? Help me rebuild a clean ledger. We'll need copies of everything, cross-referenced against client records, photos of physical receipts, time-stamped and backed up. He pulled out a timeline sketch. Most importantly, we need to... The office lights hummed to life outside our door, marking the start of another workday. I closed the folder carefully, feeling its weight like a loaded weapon. Mark? I kept my voice low as early voices filtered down the hall. How much time do we actually have? His answer would determine whether we had a real shot at this, or if we were just tilting at windmills in a game Jake had already won. Mark checked his calendar twice, then circled the date in red. 3 weeks, he said, tapping the fiscal audit deadline. 21 days to build an airtight case. I leaned back in my chair, letting that sink in. 3 weeks felt like forever, and no time at all. Walk me through what we need. Everything gets documented twice, Mark explained, sketching a timeline. Electronic copies, physical backups, every receipt, every approval, every signature. Chain of custody has to be bulletproof, or legal will shred it faster than you can say hearsay. You know that feeling when a big project suddenly gets real? When all the little pieces start falling into place? That's what hit me as I looked at Mark's timeline. 21 days to turn whispers into evidence. I started that afternoon. Waited until most folks headed to lunch, then quietly printed the first batch of expense reports. The old printer in accounting wheezed out page after page. Hotel bills, mileage logs, client dinners. Each one a thread in Jake's web of lies. Ever notice how different an office feels after hours? When the fluorescents dim and the cleaning crew's vacuums echo down empty halls? That became my new normal. I'd stay late, documenting everything. Each receipt got photographed next to that day's newspaper. Old journalist trick Mark taught me. Date and timestamp right there in the frame. No arguing about when we found what. Back home, I converted everything to digital. Files, calculated hash values, another Mark suggestion, proves nothing's been tampered with, and backed it all up. Built this massive spreadsheet linking invoice numbers to client calendars. You should have seen it. Color-coded cells showing every time Jake claimed expenses in Boston, while his client was documented in Seattle. The hardest part? Sitting through meetings like everything was normal. Jake would be there, running his mouth about fresh perspectives and young talent. Each comment aimed at me like a dart. I'd grip my pen just a little tighter, thinking about the growing stack of evidence in my home safe. Then came Thursday night around 7. Most people had cleared out when Jake's email hit my inbox. Needed my approval on an expense bundle. Standard stuff, except for one detail that jumped out. A hotel stay in Detroit overlapping with meetings he'd logged in Chicago. I stared at that approval screen for what felt like hours. Cursor just blinking there, waiting for my decision. Sign off like nothing's wrong, keep our investigation quiet, or decline it, maybe tip our hand that we're watching. You ever find yourself in one of those moments where both choices feel wrong? where you can almost see the dominoes lined up, ready to fall either way. My coffee had gone cold, and the cleaning crew's vacuum was getting closer to my office. Decision time. The cursor kept blinking, like it was counting down the seconds until Jake would wonder why his simple approval was taking so long. The old business park lot was nearly empty now, just my car and a few others scattered under sodium lights. Somewhere in the building, Jake was probably waiting for that approval notification, maybe already getting suspicious about the delay. I looked at the time. 7:42 p.m. The vacuum sounds had reached my hallway. That expense report sat open on my screen, waiting. Each option carried its own kind of risk. Say yes, and we add one more piece of evidence to our case, but my signature would be on it. Say no, and we might save this particular batch of evidence from being questioned later. But Jake would know something was up tonight. The cursor blinked again, patient as ever, waiting for me to decide which kind of dangerous we could afford to be. I hit approve on Jake's expense report that night. Sometimes you have to let the fish run with the line before you reel it in. Besides, one more documented lie only strengthened our case. The next 2 weeks fell into a rhythm as mechanical as our warehouse sorting system. Up at 5, shower, coffee, then into the office before the sun hit the windows. You ever notice how empty parking lots have this eerie peace about them? Just you and the morning birds, like the world's holding its breath. Mark and I worked like ghosts. Him in accounting, me floating between operations and my office. We developed this silent language. A nod meant new documents. A tap on a folder meant take copies. I'd scan everything twice, label it 3 times, then slide it into chronological order in our growing collection. Took my lunches at my desk now. Door closed. Easier that way. No dodging questions about why I wasn't in the break room. No watching Jake hold court with his latest stories. Just me and my salad, checking and double-checking our evidence index. Remember, Mark had said, auditors love patterns. They eat that stuff for breakfast. So I gave them a feast. Every receipt, every signature, every claimed client meeting. All lined up in neat rows that screamed fraud louder than any accusation could. You know what kept me going? That kitchen counter moment with Emily. Her voice cracking when she said she felt stupid. The way Karen's hands shook while washing dishes that night, too angry to speak. I poured all that into our documentation. Every tab I labeled, every file I indexed. They were like little revenge notes to myself. The fireproof box under my bed got heavier each night. Karen never asked what was in it, but she'd watch me review papers until midnight, my desk lamp the only light in the house. Some nights, I'd catch her standing in the doorway, just watching, maybe hoping this time the quiet fight would work better than the loud one. Last Sunday, I spread everything across our dining room table, the whole case laid out like a conspiracy board in those detective shows. 13 expense reports with duplicate submissions. 27 mileage logs that defied physics, unless Jake had figured out teleportation. 42 client meals with people who were provably elsewhere. I photographed every index page like I was documenting a crime scene, which I suppose I was. Each photo got its own timestamp, its own backup. Mark had drilled that into me. If it's not documented, it didn't happen. Barely slept that night. Kept seeing numbers floating behind my eyelids. Kept checking my phone to make sure the alarm was set. You ever lie there just watching the minutes tick by, knowing tomorrow's going to change everything? Monday morning, I actually ironed a shirt. Hadn't done that in years. Usually just grabbed whatever passed the wrinkle test. But something about this day demanded precision. Everything had to be exact, had to be perfect. The drive-in felt surreal. Same route I'd taken for 20 years, but every stoplight seemed to glow a little brighter. Every turn felt like it carried more weight. The box of evidence sat heavy in my passenger seat, like a silent partner in all this. I pulled into my usual spot just as dawn was breaking, walked through the lobby, nodded to security. Same routine, different stakes. The elevator ride to our floor was 18 seconds of pure anticipation. I'd counted it so many times before, but never this slowly. Stepped out into our office section, everything quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights warming up. I'd just unlocked my door when I heard the second elevator ding. 2 people stepped out. A man and woman in charcoal suits, carrying identical leather portfolios. The kind of matching outfits that screamed, corporate audit team. They scanned the office layout, spotted my nameplate, and walked over with purpose. Mr. Carver? The woman consulted a small notepad. We're from corporate compliance. Can we start with you? I felt the weight of that fireproof box in my hands and thought, 21 days of quiet work was about to get very loud. I led them to the small conference room, the same one where I'd confronted Jake weeks ago. Funny how spaces hold memories like that. But this time, I wasn't the one with sweaty palms. "We've prepared a comprehensive overview," I said, keeping my voice steady as I placed the box on the table. "Ever notice how your hands get steadier when you know you're right? The index is color-coded by category. Red for hotel expenses, blue for mileage claims, green for client entertainment." The woman, Ms. Chen according to her badge, nodded professionally. Her partner, Mr. Walsh, already had his laptop open. Neither smiled. Good. This wasn't a smiling kind of meeting. "Let's start with the hotel receipts from March," I suggested, pulling out the red section. "Pay attention to the dates and locations. No need for colorful language or accusations. Numbers tell their own stories if you let them." They leaned in together as I laid out the first pattern. 3 different hotel stays, same nights, different cities. Points redeemed on Jake's personal rewards account for all of them. Ms. Chen's pen hadn't stopped moving since I opened the folder. "Here's the corresponding client calendar," I continued, sliding over a printed schedule. "You'll notice none of these clients were actually in town during the reported meetings." Mr. Walsh's eyebrows inched up as he cross-referenced dates. "And you can verify the client's locations?" I pulled out a stack of emails. Direct confirmations from each client's office. They were kind enough to provide their travel records. You know that moment when you're watching someone solve a puzzle, and you can see the pieces clicking into place behind their eyes? That's what happened next. Ms. Chen's jaw tightened as she flipped through vendor confirmations. Dozens of expensive dinners where our supposed clients had been hundreds of miles away. "The mileage logs are particularly interesting," I said, moving to the blue section. "I've highlighted trips where the reported distances exceed what's physically possible in the given timeframes." Mr. Walsh typed furiously, probably running calculations. "Unless he found a way to be in Pittsburgh and Philadelphia at the same time," he muttered. I sat back and let them work. No need to oversell it. The evidence was doing all the heavy lifting, just like Mark said it would. Speaking of Mark, I caught his eye through the glass wall as he passed. The smallest nod passed between us. 21 days of quiet work was paying off. "We'll need access to the server logs," Ms. Chen announced, closing her notepad. "And security camera footage from the loading dock. Particularly for these dates." She tapped 3 entries we'd flagged for suspicious after-hours deliveries. "I'll have IT set you up in the adjacent room," I offered, standing. "Anything else you need?" "Not at the moment," Mr. Walsh replied, still scanning numbers. "But please stay available." I returned to my desk, trying to look busy with routine work. But you could feel it in the air, that electric tension before a storm breaks. Whispers rippled through the cubicles like wind through grass. Everyone sensing something was happening, but nobody quite sure what. Through my office window, I watched the morning unfold like a slow-motion film. Mark appeared in his doorway again, gave me that barely there nod that said volumes. Then Sarah from HR walked past, clutching a manila folder to her chest. Right behind her came Dennis Cooper, our senior VP of operations, a man who normally stayed on the executive floor. They headed straight for Jake's office. I kept my hands flat on my desk, fighting the urge to fidget. Jake looked up as they entered, that familiar smirk faltering just slightly. Dennis gestured toward the glass-walled conference room at the end of the hall. The walk looked like forever. Jake's shoulders were still squared, still carrying that swagger, but something had shifted. You could see it in the tight line of his jaw, the way his eyes darted around the office. The glass door closed behind them. I couldn't hear the words, but I could see mouths moving, hands gesturing. Dennis doing most of the talking, Sarah taking notes. Jake's face getting redder by the second. Then it happened. A muffled shout from behind the glass. Jake's mouth opened wide, but the word was lost in the barrier between us. His fist came down on the table, and I watched 21 days of evidence do exactly what it was supposed to do. Ever notice how big news travels through an office? It's like watching dominoes fall in slow motion. The email dropped into everyone's inbox at exactly 2:17 p.m. Subject line: important notice regarding expense policy compliance. My cursor hovered over it for a moment before I clicked. You know that feeling when you're about to open something that'll change everything? Your finger gets heavy, like it's carrying the weight of what comes next. The message was corporate speak at its finest. All carefully chosen words about irregularities discovered during routine review, and commitment to ethical standards. But the meat of it was there in black and white. Jake was suspended pending final review of his expense reports. Effective immediately. You ever watched a pot and finally boil over? That's what the office felt like right then. 20 heads popped up from their cubicles like prairie dogs. all trying to look busy while their eyes tracked the show unfolding in the glass conference room. Jake burst out like a man running from fire, his face the color of a stop sign. His phone was plastered to his ear, and whatever conversation he was having wasn't going well. I caught snippets as he stormed past. Lawyer and "they can't," and a few choice words that would have made my mother wash his mouth out with soap. The sound of his footsteps hadn't even died away before chairs started scraping. Everyone suddenly needed to be very interested in their computer screens. But I knew better. Those screens were lighting up with chat messages, spreading the news faster than any official memo could. I kept my hands firmly in my lap. No fist pumps, no victory laps. Instead, I thought about Emily's tears at our kitchen counter that night. How small she looked when she said she felt stupid. How this wasn't about winning. It was about making things right. A new calendar invite popped up. Expense audit follow-up. Mandatory. Ms. Chen and Mr. Walsh wanted one more session to tie everything up neat and proper. I brought the last few documents they needed. Original routing slips I'd held back as insurance. They had me sign about 15 different forms acknowledging chain of custody and my role in the investigation. Legal stuff mostly, but it felt like closing a book. Remember what I said about how news travels? By the time I walked back to my desk, Jake's office was already cleared out. It had moved fast. His computer was gone, his drawers emptied. A photo frame lay face down on the bare desk, like it had been knocked over in the rush. I didn't pick it up. Some things are better left where they fall. Standing there, looking at that empty desk, I knew this wasn't the end yet. It was like that moment in the movies right before the big crash scene. Everything's gone quiet, but you know the explosion's coming. The blade was still falling, and the town was about to hear it hit. My phone buzzed. Another company-wide email, this one shorter. No corporate smooth talk this time. Effective immediately, Jake. Morrison's employment with the company has been terminated. I had to grip the stair rail for a minute after reading that. 21 days of quiet work, and it all came down to 2 sentences in an email. The word would spread through town like wildfire. Our industry wasn't that big, and news like this had legs. You okay? It was Mark, appearing at my elbow like he had a sixth sense for these moments. I nodded, still holding the rail. Yeah, just processing. Better hold on, he said quietly. Town's about to get real interesting. He wasn't wrong. My phone was already lighting up with texts from people who'd somehow heard already. The rumor mill was spinning up. And somewhere out there, Jake was probably figuring out exactly how far this fall was going to go. Funny how fast a man's world can shrink. One day, you're the king of sales, holding court at client lunches and bragging about your coaching gig at the country club. Next thing you know, those same clients are suddenly booked solid through Q3. I didn't go looking for updates on Jake's fall from grace. They found me. Everyone loves sharing that kind of news, don't they? Like they're passing around pieces of a broken crown. First it was Dennis from accounting. Hey, you hear Capital Motors canceled their monthly lunch meeting? Said they're restructuring their vendor relationships. He made air quotes with his fingers, both of us knowing what that really meant. Then Sarah from marketing caught me at the coffee machine. Did you see Jake's Facebook? Half his photos disappeared overnight. People untagging themselves left and right. She stirred her coffee way longer than necessary, waiting for my reaction. I just nodded and walked away. The coaching gig he'd bragged about? Gone within 48 hours of the news breaking. Something about maintaining professional standards for our youth program. When you build your reputation on swagger and shortcuts, it doesn't take much for the whole house of cards to fold. I remember walking past O'Malley's one evening, Jake's favorite spot to hold court. Used to be, you couldn't get near the place on a Thursday night, not with him and his crew taking up half the bar. Now those stools sat empty, like teeth missing from a smile. The bartender was wiping the same spot over and over, probably wondering where all his regular tips went. But I had more important things to focus on than Jake's social death spiral. Home needed attention, real attention, not just physical presence. You know what I mean? That kind where you actually put down your phone and look people in the eye when they talk. I ordered Emily's favorite takeout, those sticky rice rolls from the place near campus, and we sat at the kitchen counter. Just us. Karen was at her book club, which was perfect. Some conversations need a smaller audience. You know what the difference is between shame and accountability? I asked her, passing over the soy sauce. She shook her head, poking at her rice. Shame's what people like Jake try to put on others. Accountability? That's what happens when their own actions catch up with them. I watched her face as that sank in. What happened wasn't your fault. The shame belongs to him. The guy who thought bragging about conquests made him look big. Remember those moments when you can actually see something shift in someone's eyes? Emily had one right then. She straightened up a little, nodded once, and took a real bite of her food. The next morning, an envelope arrived that changed everything. Heavy cream-colored paper, gold seal in the corner. Emily's college acceptance letter. Full admission for fall term. She'd applied months ago, back before all this started. But somehow the timing felt perfect. I found her clutching it in the living room, a smile breaking through like sunshine after rain. "Dad, I got in." Looking at that letter, I had an idea. "You know what we should do? Frame this. Hang it right where everyone can see it." I remembered an old frame up in the attic. Solid wood with just enough character to look intentional. Spent half an hour that evening cleaning it up, wiping the glass until it squeaked. The letter fit perfectly, like it had been waiting for this moment. When I finished wrapping it, I set it by the front door. Tomorrow morning, it would hang in my office, right where Jake's sales awards used to catch everyone's eye. A different kind of story on display. Emily ran her fingers over the wrapped package before heading upstairs. "Thanks, Dad. Not just for this, for everything." I watched her go, feeling something settle in my chest. Not victory, that wasn't the right word. More like balance, the kind that comes from knowing you fought the right way, for the right reasons. Early victory. I pulled into the parking lot at 7:45 the next morning. The wrapped frame tucked carefully in my passenger seat. The early sunlight had that clean, golden quality that makes everything look new. You know the kind I mean? Like the world's been reset overnight. The building was quiet. Just the hum of the AC and someone's forgotten coffee mug from yesterday still sitting in the break room. Perfect. I wanted this moment to myself. My office looked different somehow. Maybe it was the way the morning light slanted through the blinds. Or maybe it was just knowing what I was about to do. I set my briefcase down and unwrapped the frame, running my thumb over the polished wood one last time. There was already a nail in the wall where Jake's President's Club award used to hang. Funny how things work out sometimes, isn't it? I lifted the frame carefully. Emily's acceptance letter looked even better behind glass, and hung it square and true. The gold seal caught the light like a wink. I stepped back, adjusting my tie in the reflection. Through the glass walls, I could see the whole floor starting to wake up. People trickling in, coffee cups in hand, logging into computers. Life going on. But different now. Word had spread fast about Jake's termination. Corporate didn't mess around with fraud. They'd blacklisted him across the industry. No severance, no references, just a stark termination for cause in his file. The kind of mark that follows you. But the corporate hammer wasn't even the worst part. Remember all those client lunches he'd bragged about? Gone. Those weekend golf games with vendors? Cancelled. Even his Thursday night crew at O'Malley's had scattered like leaves in a storm. Nobody wanted their name tied to his anymore. I opened my blinds all the way, letting the hallway light bounce off the glass. Anyone walking past could see it clear as day. Not a sales trophy or a corporate award, but a father's quiet pride in his daughter's achievement. That was the story I wanted told. Sitting at my desk, I pulled up a blank email. Mark deserved a proper thank you, not just for the evidence, but for being the kind of colleague who stands up when it matters. I attached our final index, just to close the loop properly, and kept the message simple. Thank you. Some battles need allies. The folder that had consumed 3 weeks of my life sat on my desk. All those late nights documenting, cross-referencing, building our case. I closed it with a firm snap and slid it into my bottom drawer. Done. The morning air felt different in my lungs now. Cleaner somehow. My hands were steady as I logged into my computer. No trace of the tremors that had plagued me weeks ago. The tightness in my shoulders, that coiled spring of helpless anger, had finally unwound. I thought about Emily at the kitchen counter last night, tracing her fingers over that acceptance letter. The way her eyes lit up when I suggested framing it. How she stood straighter, like she was shrugging off a weight. Standing up, I walked over to the frame and touched the corner gently. The glass was cool and smooth under my fingertips. 20 years of working here. And this was the first thing I'd hung that really mattered. "No man steals my pride twice," I said quietly to the empty office. Not a threat, not a boast, just a simple truth, spoken aloud so it couldn't be mistaken. The frame caught another beam of morning sun, sending little rainbows dancing across my desk. Emily's name stood out bold and clear on the letter, her future stretching out ahead of her unmarked by someone else's ugly chapter. I sat back down as the office began to fill, listening to the familiar sounds of another workday beginning. But now, watching people glance. Through my glass walls, their eyes catching on that framed letter, I knew which story would be told. Not Jake's, not anymore.